What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Sec Tech Podcast. We are so excited that you're here with us today. My name is Matt. With me, as always, is Ken Williamson. Ken, 2 button-ups in a row.
I know. I'm being the change I want to see in the world. Try to dress it up a little bit.
Perfect.
Another day. It's been a busy day for me. Like, I had a lot of stuff going on this morning, so I just kind of trying to collect myself. But I'm so happy to be back here with you. One thing I wanted to ask you about before we get started was, are you getting nervous about daddy daycare? It's coming up so soon. Your wife's going back to work.
Right. Next weekend.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, my wife's a nurse, so she works Saturday, Sunday. So, I'm working Monday through Friday. Everything's fine. But yeah, Saturday, Sunday, starting next weekend, it is just me and the baby for 12 hours a day. And I have never felt the pressure, more responsibility. We did a dry run the other day. It's going to go well. I'm convincing myself it's going to go well.
I know it will be.
Yeah, I enjoy
you're gonna
it.
Do great.
I like it. It's fun just to hang out, and it's kind of an excuse on the weekend to just stop doing things.
That's right. Total hermit mode.
Right.
Oh, I got the baby.
Exactly.
It's nothing I can do. Sorry, guys.
Yep, exactly. And I took your advice. I got this, and I look very silly, but I got this shirt where I can put him in,
That's
so I can
awesome.
be hands-free. He loves it.
Yeah. That's so good.
Yeah. So yeah. Next weekend, let's talk about that. The next podcast, and I'll basically just update everybody on whether
we'll
or
follow
not
up for sure.
we had any emergency room visits or anything crazy.
I know it's gonna go great.
Yeah.
I mean, you're such a good dad, and it comes. It's a little awkward at first, but it comes natural when you have that love, and I'm sure you're gonna do great.
I appreciate it. I'll be calling you when I need something.
Yeah. No, feel free.
But I'm excited for our guest today.
I am so excited. It is really, really awesome. Okay, we just get to it. You can introduce him, and then we'll get going.
Yeah, so his name is Chris Barba. He's got over 2 decades of experience within technology. He's worked in management. He's currently with the Bank of Oklahoma, overseeing some of their Salesforce teams, most of their Salesforce teams. He's worked in aerospace. He's worked in tech. He's worked in tech startups. I mean, all over the board. And what I've already caught, in the conversation I've been able to have with this guy, what I really like about him is that he has the ability to think technically, but also empathize with people. And that's so much of what we
valuable.
talk about, And so it's going to be a really, really good conversation. So we will be right back with our guest, Chris Barba. All right, guys, welcome back. We're here with our guest, Chris Barba. Chris, how you doing today, man?
Hey, I'm doing great. This weather's kind of throwing me off a little bit. I'm not really sure if I need my jacket or not, but it's Oklahoma weather.
Right.
Yeah.
My grandmother always said there's nothing between Oklahoma and Alaska but barbed wire. So that's how I prepare for the winter, of knowing that there's going to be some of that Arctic breeze is going to come through.
Yeah, and it kind of tricked us this year, because they were all saying back in February, spring is here. It's warm weather, and then now we're March, almost April, and we're getting that cold weather. I don't know. A lot of times we end up with kind of a late snow, late March, early April, and I'm wondering if something like that might be in the cards for us this year. So we'll have to see.
I've been in kind of a protest. Like, I put all my winter stuff away.
Nice.
I have like one hoodie out, and I just refuse to get it back out. I'm just like, I'm gonna revolt against the weather as if it's gonna listen to me. But I feel you guys. Here in Oklahoma, I'm hoping we only have a couple more weeks of this cold. But I'm really excited to talk to you today, Chris.
Me too.
You've got so much experience. We could take this. I mean, we could have sliced this in so many different ways, just based off of all the things that you've worked on. Maybe one day we got to get you back in to talk about some of that aerospace stuff, because I think that whole industry is fascinating. But today, I really wanted to talk to you about something that you've actually been teaching me in our conversations leading up to this podcast. You've really been implementing a very, very cool I don't know if you want to call it an ideology or a framework of thought within your team of not necessarily looking at digital transformation as a project, but adopting the mentality of a product and being product focused, not project focused. Tell me a little bit about that. Tell me a little bit about where, those ideas have come from and how you're implementing that right now.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. Anybody who spent any kind of time in IT will always have stories of, hey, here's how my projects have failed. Over budget, behind schedule, or they didn't deliver what was actually expected.
Right.
So the question is kind of like why and what are those countermeasures?
Yeah.
So the shift from project to product is really a mindset shift. And to kind of understand why you need that shift, we can talk about the Cynefin framework. So it's a Welsh word. You'll have to look it up to Google. I can't spell it. But there's 4 different domains of work: simple, complicated, complex, and chaotic. Chaotic is like a natural disaster, a cybersecurity attack. You have no idea what the rules are. You're just trying to figure things out. Simple work is, hey, this is repeatable. Every time I put 1 + 1 into my calculator, I get 3. Every time I put these variables in, I get the same output. That's simple work. So desktop support, I need to put out a laptop. I can build you a checklist of here's what to do. There's going to be no uncertainty. It's just going to work. Complicated work. This is work where you need like domain expertise. Hey, if I have somebody who understands the difference between, metric and imperial measurements in terms of building a building and knowing how to read architectural diagrams, that's complicated work. Complex work. That's where software delivery really sits. So that is work where you have unknown unknowns. You can't predict or forecast the uncertainty of the unknowns you're going to experience. You need to learn and iterate your way towards the product that you're building. And that's why a lot of projects fail, is they don't realize you're in the complex space. And when you apply complicated solutions to complex work, it's a mismatch. And why we end up over budget or behind schedule, because we can't predict these things. So there are scenarios where projects do work. Simple and complicated work great. Complex is a situation where, like I said, you're going to have to experiment your way to a solution. You're going to have to learn something to learn if you're building the right solution. So I always like to start off with defining what the terms are. It's like the Princess Bride when you're talking to people in IT. You're using that word, but I'm not sure you know what it means.
Yeah,
So true.
Yeah.
Not everything is inconceivable. So projects are temporary. They have a definite beginning and end. It's always bound by time, scope, and cost. So they're also very asset intensive. People, materials, time, you need those to kind of carry out the work. And projects are measured by outputs. How many hours did you charge? How many hours did you work? How many hours did you bill? How many lines of code did you create? How many screens did you create? I can build a product with 47 screens. Well, that may not meet what the business actually needs, what the users need. So with projects, there's this iron triangle: time, scope, and dollars. And so you can't increase scope without increasing dollars or cost, which is what gets, time and cost, which gets you the overschedule and behind budget.
Sure.
So the scope is that thing that's flexible. In the complex space, you can't actually define what your scope is because it's going to change. Something will come up that you did not predict. So an example of a project, the easiest one is a building. I'm building a building. It is clear and easy to see when I'm done. Hey, if there's no roof, we're not done.
Right.
When you take a look at a product, it's kind of a different, kind of flipping that iron triangle on its head and looking at the other sides of what you want to adjust. Time and dollars are fixed. I got 40 developers for a year. That's easy to do the math on how much that's going to cost. Then the question becomes, scope is the lever that I'm going to be adjusting. So products are long running. They're continuously evolving and improving. They require a long-term commitment from a stable team.
Yeah.
They focus on the user experience. Just because I build X number of screens doesn't mean that that user is going to get the value out of it. They also very much encourage modern ways of working. I kind of view it as like a capstone of agile, DevOps, lean, making work visible, value stream, continuous improvement. A product kind of overwraps all of those concepts. It's typically a strategic enabler. Progress is measured by outcomes, not outputs. So an outcome would be, hey, I want to increase my click-through rate on my website requesting my product. That's an outcome that you can measure.
Yeah.
And that's an outcome that's actually going to drive value.
I liked what you said there real quick with the house, or sorry, with the building. Because if you talk to anybody in real estate who builds a building, let's say, we're in a commercial building right now. Let's say I'm going to build a commercial building. The project of building the building is done when the building is done, right? I can walk through, there's walls, like you said, there's a roof. But for me, this building is a product. It's not done in my mind. If I'm building a commercial building, it's done when, it's never done because I got to fill tenants, and then I got to go over what the tenants need, and then I got to get things ready for them, and then eventually I'm gonna have new tenants. It's never, we like to think about things as fine, like it's done. Even your house, I built a house from scratch, and then guess what? A year later, we added to it. It wasn't done, right? I didn't have this expectation that every single thing, the pool was going to be, no, I got to, a year later, cool, now let's put in a pool, right? It's never, and so with what you're saying, that's really kind of what grabbed me right away is when you're talking about that product. It's like, if you just viewed it as it's done when all the walls are up and all that, then yeah, sure, I guess it's done. But when you think about it as a product, well, we all make changes to our house, and
Right.
You know what I mean?
You can think about it this way also. Quick Trip, they build a gas station. That's the product. That's the project.
Yeah.
The product is the service they provide to the consumers. How easy do they make it for me to spend money at their location?
Very.
That's the product, yes. That's the product that they have. So products, I always like to give examples of that, like Salesforce. Sales enablement. You're always going to have salespeople. That's not something that's going to go away. So that makes sense for it to be a product. Websites that your clients engage with, mobile apps, those are always changing. You go take a look at the, what they call it, the Wayback Machine, and go look at what Facebook looked like 5 years ago, 10 years ago. It's radically different. So these are examples of things that are continuously evolving and improving. So it does take a major shift if you're going to shift away from a product. Projects are easy to kind of go away from of, hey, we've shut this down. I've condemned this building. Now I'm going to go build a new building. So I like to give these examples of kind of the differences to kind of make it easy to understand where the line is. The biggest difference is shifting from minimizing cost to maximizing the value delivered. That is the big difference between projects and products.
Yeah, I think there's so many good points there. And what you had mentioned before about scope is, I think, so key because, Matt's dealing with that issue. I'm dealing with that issue. In software, it's inevitable that you start out with what you know, and then there's discovery of what you don't know, and you can't even figure it out until you get there, right? It's like, because you don't even have the context set up to ask the question to the users. And so I just think that is such an important thing. And what you were saying about, well, if you're thinking about it as a project, then you can increase your scope without increasing the
Time and dollars.
But if you're making that shift to a product, then you already know your time and dollars that you're going to be sent on a continual basis. And that's what I think is another key point that we want to get across, is that thinking of it as a product that you're going to be continually working on, and you're setting aside money for it, and you're getting that kind of set, well, then that allows you to kind of say, well, what can be the scope for now, and so I just think all of those are such great points.
Yeah, you have a product manager who's really trying to dive into how can we build value?
Yeah.
What are our customers going to use? If you deliver more value to your customers, they will reward you with their business. And this is how you outperform your competitors.
Yeah. 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 No, and it sounds simple when you just say it that way. And in truth, when, we like to complicate, a lot of things. You said this earlier when you were talking about, software, about, those different levels, right? And I here's something I love that you said. You were talking about complex, and you were saying complex requires us to go learn something.
Yes.
So often in software, we sometimes misfit, we put the wrong technology into a project because we want to get going. Whatever, JavaScript is what my developer knows, but this would be a lot better project if we used C# on the back end, or another technical framework. But that would require us having to stop and go learn something, or let that developer go learn something so that he can maximize and make it the best product. And so often I think that step can really get skipped over a lot in technology. We don't give the people developing time to go learn the necessary new things that they need to know so that they can do that project the best. And then we get mad at them when there's limitations, right?
Yeah. With the 3 ways of DevOps: flow, feedback, and continuous learning. Feedback is that cycle that you're talking about. How many times have you had a developer go sit with a user and watch them use your application that you go, oh, I had no idea this is how they did their job.
100%.
And it radically changes how you actually build the product. And that gets into that learning of, it's the gimbal walk. It's a lean management technique where you go where the work is to observe, to learn. And that's the feedback cycle that helps you make sure you're building the right product. Products are about achieving business results and outcomes. Understanding what those are, it's a mindset shift.
Yeah.
As a developer, it's so easy to be in the situation of, hey, somebody's going to throw me a user story. I'm going to go write a screen. They want these 10 fields, save it to the database, create this report. But making that translation to how is this actually going to impact somebody's day job? Is it going to help them? Is it going to hinder them? Are we reducing cost? Are we reducing the amount of time it takes to do work? Making that shift to needing to understand more about the business. And that's why adopting modern ways of working is so essential, because it really drives you to actually caring about the value of what you build.
That's so good.
Yeah, I mean, the value proposition is so important. This is something that our founder Hank always likes to say, which is that if we're working on a product, then we need to either be using the same amount of inputs and getting more outcomes, or we need to be using less inputs to get the same outcome. And I think that is, really key. And it's not about the project mentality. It has to be about that product mentality where we're measuring outcomes and not we're measuring necessarily like deliverables, like you were saying, the screens and whatnot. But I wanted to kind of drill in a little bit to how does someone that's in your position, in a relatively high level place in an organization, but you're not necessarily the top key decision maker. How do you go about trying to drive this mindset shift? Like, it's got to be a lot of communication that's happening in order to get that idea out there, because the project mentality is pervasive, and especially, you're in a big organization. We've worked for you guys, other big organizations. Trying to get those kind of ideological shifts is usually pretty difficult. So do you want to talk a little bit about how you go about that?
Yeah, so it's you need to be comfortable with people looking at you like you have lobsters growing out of your head. Yeah, because you're going to be introducing topics they're not familiar with, they've never even heard of.
Right.
Now, there's a lot of education that has to go on. And the best thing about it is you can take an iterative approach. I don't need to change your entire world. Let's start by making work visible. Let's get the work your developers are doing up on the Agile board so we can then kind of understand where there's improvement opportunities. The other thing that I think is really important, you have to meet people where they are. So depending upon where they are in the organization and where they are in terms of the maturing on their digital transformation journey. Hey, if you have never heard of the word Scrum and I tell you about a retrospective and it's over your head, well, that tells me I need to start in a different place than somebody that's been doing it and is looking at getting better. We all have these stories about projects and how they fail. The easiest selling point is, tell me about the last big project you did. Why did it fail? Show me your lessons learned. And then you can present, here's the countermeasures to prevent this problem. You brought an implementation partner who did all the learning and then left, and then nobody could support it. Okay, well, now let's talk about cross-functional teams and why those are so essential to have a long-lived cross-functional team. Everybody who's needed to deliver the work is working together under the same management. We can talk about why things take so long on large projects. Okay, well, there's waste in processes. Cross-team dependencies. If I do work and you have a different sprint cycle than I do, it could be 3 to 4 weeks before you do the work I need. And so I'm just sitting here waiting on that. So there's a lot of different ways to kind of attack that problem. It is a slow process. Sometimes it's kind of maddening. The best thing to do is if you have enough control to start implementing some Scrum, some Agile, Kanban, DevOps, show improvement. So, hey, if you go to your boss and said, hey, we've implemented some lean management techniques, eliminating waste in our process, which we can get into later about the different metrics you're going to want to use, our throughput's doubled. Everybody's going to be like, hey, like you just mentioned, I need to do more work with the same number of people. How do I go about achieving that? Well, then let me educate you on the variety, the 7 different forms of waste in software development and why lean helps us solve those problems.
I love that. And so one of the things, right? So like Ken was saying, you're in a position where you've got to sell some of this upstairs, right? Yeah. And and I love what you're saying. Introduce it slowly. Hey, we did a little bit of these techniques. It really worked. A little bit of this. Hey, guys, actually, this is kind of part of a larger, scope of what I'm trying to do. Here's where I'm trying to take my team. But the one question that is always going to come back from anybody is, okay, cool. You kind of want to adapt processes. How much is that going to cost me? And do I have to add resources, right? So can you speak to that? Does this process require more of a budget, or do you feel like with these implementations I can feel really confident that I can keep resources the same but still maximize efficiency?
So yeah, that's a very big question that can go a lot of different directions. On the people side, one of the big differences between projects and products is on a project you bring the team to the work. On a product, you have a team, a long-standing team, and you bring the work to the team for having them help deliver. So we mentioned before about cross-team dependencies. There's a lot of waste there. And so having a cross-functional team, everybody who performs the roles needed, working directly together, you resolve a lot of those. You don't want to manage dependencies. You want to eliminate them. So it doesn't always necessarily require a shift in resources and adding more. So as you make the transition, what you're starting to realize is more value. And that's going to become the bigger challenge really is, and once you start delivering more value, you're getting more click-throughs, you're getting more downloads, you're getting more people buying your products, there's going to be more of a demand on your resources. And that's when you need to worry about scaling and growing. Now, budgeting. So that's always the typical question. Anybody you talk to asks 2 questions. When is it going to be done and how much is it going to cost? So the budget does shift. Projects typically are done on annual budget cycles. They could be decided anywhere 3 to 5 years ahead of time. A lot can happen in 5 years.
Yeah.
I always tell people, well, are you willing to trade your iPhone to, the iPhone 10? We're on like 18 or 15 or whatever now. nobody's going to want to make that transition. So using this long-term view of here's how I plan my budget, that's going to change.
Yeah.
So the budgets are really aligned with the team and the value of what you're delivering. So you shift what you're measuring.
Yeah.
Your team is actually held more accountable to the budget now. If you go tell me I got $1 million to go implement something, great.
Yeah.
That doesn't really speak to me. But hey, if every quarter I need to prove that I actually delivered some value,
Right.
That's right.
that is a different level of ownership and accountability on your team. The question of when will it be done? I can spend an entire hour talking about metrics
we could
around, around what you need to be measuring.
Yeah.
Typical projects are like how many story points or how many hours are you estimating?
Yeah.
Right.
Wrong metric. You will find yourself, it's an anti-pattern, in the same position of you're going to go over budget and you're going to go over schedule.
Definitely.
So focusing on the right metrics like lead time, cycle time, throughput. Lead time is, hey, when I get a request, how long before that's in production?
Yeah.
The faster I can go with that, the more value I can deliver, the faster I can get feedback from our customers, the faster I can shift directions. Because Waterfall does great at planning. Fabulous job. You spend a lot of time planning. Where any of the Agile frameworks really come into play is you're allowed to inspect and adapt to your plan.
Yeah.
I made a plan in 2018. Guess what? It's wrong. It's 2024.
Yeah.
But with following, Scrum, you have that plan, do, checked, act cycle. I plan to do something. Let me do it. Let me check in 2 weeks. Am I going in the right direction? And if not, I can make adjustments. Again, it gets back to how do you get better at delivering value? Not sure necessarily if I've answered your questions.
No, I think so.
Okay.
Definitely most of it. So I love what you said there, and it's one thing it is so much of a shift in what you're looking at, right? Talking about the budget, like you could have a fixed budget and still make what you're talking about work, and really what you're really going to be telling your stakeholders is that, well, we're going to have to, reduce the scope of some things as we learn more information, or, we find out something's really easy. That sometimes happens. and we can increase the scope. But, when people are stuck in this project mentality, they are very interested in when can something be delivered. How do you bridge that gap to say, well, we're not really going to be able to tell you exactly when XYZ feature is going to be delivered, but on average, here's our lead time. On average, like, how do you approach those kinds of conversations with stakeholders for your products?
Yeah, that is probably one of the hardest conversations to have, is to people who don't understand what you're talking about. You're then having to represent, new ways of doing math.
Yeah.
I can't give you an estimate of how long something's going to be. Story points are great to see, does the team have shared understanding? I'm asking for a feature to export something from this screen. You think it's going to be 1 point, and you think it's going to be 8 points. Well, that tells me we don't have shared understanding, so we don't have accuracy around what we're trying to accomplish.
That's actually very accurate because he's a lot better than me. We have done that quite a few times in Scrum Poker where I'm like, that's a 5, and he's like, it's a 1. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, jeez.
Oh, man.
So with shifting out of that that's good for a local conversation. That's not helpful at a bigger scale. So then what you need to look at is, what you need is historical data, which is why you want to have a long-lived team. If I got the same people who've been working together for a year, that throughput's going to be steady and consistent. Now, we can get some mathy things, talking about Monte Carlo simulations, where, hey, I can provide a range of certainty around an estimate. If you come to me and tell me your product, you can break it down into 150 tasks, I can give you a range, 80%, I'm going to be able to hit it in the month of April. So we have an understanding here of, this is the scope you want, this is the certainty level I can give you. It gets real mathy, It's above my head. I got to bring in some other people when I try and have those conversations. But it is a shifting of the metrics that you use to try and plan out.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go for it.
Okay. I was going to say one thing you've mentioned a couple of times, but we haven't really dove into is a long running or long lived cross functional team. So people that aren't familiar maybe don't know exactly what you mean when you say that, but can you talk a little bit about what that means, and then maybe a little bit about why that's better than the way things are done in general right now?
So a project gets approved. You need headcount. I need 4 developers, 2 BAs, and 2 testers. So they go out, hey, who's got capacity? I'm going to go grab you from this team. I'm going to grab you from that team. I'm going to go hire these 3 people.
Yep.
Teamwork is hard.
Yeah.
Half of your job as a leader is to get people to work together. It is challenging. We can talk about the 5 dysfunctions of a team. I mean, there's a lot of topics we can talk about. How do you get people to work together? One of the things a project plan typically doesn't have is like any kind of discovery period or any kind of learning period of how do we work together? How wide and how deep are you? I got to figure that. I got to pressure test that. You say you can call REST APIs, but have you really done it before? Have you done it from SAP? That is radically different than doing it from Microsoft.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of learning that needs to go on there to really understand how well you work to each other, what your strengths, what your weaknesses are, where you have gaps. How well do you understand the process of software delivery? If you've always done waterfall development, that'll be a little bit challenging of walking into a Scrum team. You won't understand what the point of a retro is, why psychological safety matters. Having a long-running cross-functional team is how the countermeasure for that. If I've worked together with somebody, a developer, for the last year or two, I've seen his code. I've done his code reviews. I know exactly where his strengths and weaknesses are. I know where we need to work together. I know where we need to bring in some expertise we don't have. Hey, I've never done anything with Kafka. Great. That's somewhere where I need to go hire that kind of skill set. Really what you want to do is reduce the amount of variation in your work, which measuring flow, throughput, lead time, cycle time, that gives you an understanding of where you have variation.
That's great. That's great. We are close to time. And so, but I know you have one more question.
Well, I just wanted to follow up on just to kind of restate. So cross-functional means that we have complementary skills and we can do across a number of different tasks. You know, we have a front-end guy rather than maybe how companies are traditionally set up where you have a front-end dev team, you have a back-end dev team, you have a data team, you have a QA team, whatever. All of these different teams that are specific to one thing that is a part of software development. When we say cross-functional, we mean that instead of doing it that way, we're going to have a single team that's going to have a front-end guy, a back-end guy, a data guy, a QA guy, you know, whatever else. And then I love what you said about it being long-running, because it's exactly right. There's this huge misconception that we can treat people in general, but also developers, as kind of interchangeable cogs.
I cannot drive to Home Depot and tell 3 guys to get in the back of my truck to deliver a website faster.
Right, exactly. Exactly. And
so good.
And developers, I mean, people in general, but also specifically developers, are not all the same. No. They're not all a cog that you can just fit into a machine. And exactly what you said, strengths and weaknesses. So I just wanted to reiterate that point, because I think that is so key.
Hugely valuable to the success. The cross-functional team, like you said, every role you need to perform that job is working together. Amazon has a model they call single-threaded leadership. They don't report to other people. The business and the IT report up to the same management structure. Eliminate those dependencies across teams. No matter what, if somebody reports to a different manager, no matter how many times you say they're dedicated to my project, they will have a different bias, a different direction, a different vision of where they're going, which is not in alignment with where we're trying to go.
I think that's great. So a lot of concepts thrown out. I think that a lot of people listening to this are going to go, how can I get started with this type of mentality shift. So last question I'll ask you, what resources, if anybody's like, I want to hear more about this,
Yeah,
what
where can
resources?
I go more? Do you want to know more, right? Where do we go?
Yeah.
So everybody learns differently. And so books, I learn from books. I read a lot of books. Clean Agile, Making Work Visible, How Big Things Get Done, Team Topologies, The Lean Startup, Sooner, Safer, Happier, Project to Product. So this book is really what started the movement of really understanding why you need to switch to a value stream versus just a functional software delivery team. It is dense, I will tell you, which is why I left it at the bottom of the list. Start with the other books because you need to go through a digital transformation. You need to adopt modern ways of working before this will really make sense of the why. Podcast, Small Batches, Ideal Cast, Mick Plus One. Those are some podcasts that introduce some of these modern ways of working, the DevOps, the Lean, the Scrum, the success stories of why a company making a transition, why a team making a transition to that product mentality, how they perform better, which then leads to higher profit for the company, more market share. If you're looking for other information, IT Revolutions. That's a website that has a lot of great content. They write a lot of books, but they also have a lot of great white papers, a lot of great blogs, and a lot of videos. So if you're somebody who's more like, hey, I need a video to kind of watch this. So the videos of like Mick Kirsten, who wrote this book, talking about what this movement really means. PlanView is another resource, planview.com. They produce a project management tool that is very much, they actually hired Mick Kirsten to help them on this journey of, hey, we develop a project management tool. How do we shift into a product management tool? So that's another great resource if you're looking for like shorter articles and blog posts to read. I got like a stack I print out where I go through and read like what are the steps to make this journey? How do I know I'm doing this right? Or doing this well?
That's great. That's great.
So good.
Like so many of our guests, I feel like I could go 2 or 3 hours, but
Definitely could go a lot longer. We'll try to have you back. It's been so great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Oh,
It's
thank
been
you.
great to have
I love talking about this. I love helping educate other people on there are better ways of working. We don't have to be miserable at work.
Right.
Right.
We can be high performing. We can be successful. We can deliver value.
Yeah. No, that's great. I hope you listen to this twice. I think I'm going to go back and definitely listen to this. So much good information. Thank you so much to our guest, Chris. Thank you, Ken. And we will be back with you guys in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.